because we had the Attorney General there at Cabinet, and he was able to tell people his opinion, explain his reasoning, answer any questions that they had. And in the end, remember, for the past few days, it's been said that the Attorney General advised that it was illegal to go to war. He didn't. He advised it was lawful. Now, I totally understand why there will be people in this audience tonight who very, very strongly disagree with my decision to take this country to war in Iraq. Okay? All I can say to you is this. It's not a matter of the Attorney General's advice, because it's been shown that he advised it was lawful. Neither is it a matter of misusing the intelligence. There have been 4 inquiries into that. It is, however, a question of a difficult decision I had to take. Was it better to leave Saddam in power or put him in prison? I think it was better to put him in prison.
Christopher Jones' question isn't about the Attorney General's final decision. It's about this document, which you have been avoiding publishing for the past 2 years, and were forced to publish at 11:30 this morning suddenly. And did this document go before Cabinet? And if not, why not? And did this document go before the House of Commons, with all its hesitations, reservations, explanations, so that your backbench MPs had a chance to study the whole background to the legal decision that he then made?
In respect of Parliament, the Attorney General's advice is never published to Parliament. It's been published, I think, 3 times over the last 100 years.
Here it is now.
It's exactly
published to everybody.
Exactly, because it's been leaked, and therefore you might as well have the full opinion. In respect of Cabinet, the reason why we didn't give people the advice is we actually had the Attorney General there in Cabinet, and there isn't any doubt about it.
Was all this ground covered?
The Attorney General went through his reasoning and explained to Cabinet why, in his view, there was a reasonable case that could be made that the action was lawful. Now, that is what has happened. And look, as I say, in the end, you can frame this any way you want. But the question was, when we were faced with the situation, I think it's important people understand this. Back in March 2003, we were trying to get a second United Nations resolution. We couldn't get one, because France said they would not accept any resolution with an ultimatum to Saddam. In the end, therefore, I had to decide. We had 250,000 UK and US troops down there. It was a tough decision. It was a difficult one. I don't expect everyone to agree with it. I don't disrespect people who take a completely different point of view. But I'm afraid this was an occasion, there was no fence to sit on. I had to take the decision, and I took it.
Okay. Christopher Jones, you asked a question. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, the thing I don't understand is, given the importance of the decision, and I take your point that the Attorney General was there in Cabinet, but I read that opinion today, and it makes interesting reading, and I just can't understand why the Cabinet, who are a bunch of clever individuals who you rely on, weren't given the opportunity to see that document as well as question the Attorney General.
But because they actually had the Attorney General there in person.
But what...
And therefore, in a sense, what was important was that he was able to take them through the reasoning in person and say to them...
But not that piece of paper.
No, because he was there able to explain it orally himself. And look, in the end, the only question is, did the Attorney General advise that the war was lawful? He did. But in the end, the decision about this, it isn't really to do with the Attorney General. It was a political decision that had to be taken. Look, I've been over this ground, I don't know how many times in the last couple of years, and I totally understand why some people feel that this was the wrong decision to take. But I happen to believe, for the reasons that I gave, it was the right decision.
All right. Let's hear from you, sir.
Did any member of the Cabinet ask to read the Attorney General's guide?
No member of the Cabinet asked for it, because the Attorney General was there and able to take them through it personally.
Right. You, madam?
Was the Attorney General present at the Cabinet meeting before or after he changed his mind?
He didn't... with respect, he didn't change his mind. The 7th of March advice was, which has now been published, was that it was lawful. And when he came to Cabinet, he explained, as he says in his advice, of course it's better to have a second resolution, but if you can't get one, then the action is still lawful for the reasons that he gave.
All right, the woman here.
I think it's very interesting that you decide to describe your decision as a political decision. What it was a political decision to support your best mate, George Bush. And his re-election campaign. The other point is you always say, oh, it's perfectly OK because Saddam Hussein is a really nasty guy. Clearly that is self-evidently true. It is also an academic point. The reality is George Bush would have invaded and removed Saddam Hussein with or without your support.
Well, first of all, it wasn't an academic point. for the hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who lost their life under Saddam Hussein. It was important for them. Now, you may say that I took the action simply for America. I didn't. I took it because I believed it was in the interests of this country. If we had backed away and left Saddam in power, immeasurably stronger because we had backed away, I think that would have been bad for the security of our region and our world and therefore of this country. Now, as I say, you can conduct this debate in whichever way you want, but I took that decision in good faith. And sometimes when you're sitting in my seat as Prime Minister, you have to take the decision. That's the decision I took.
You've got a very difficult job. You're Prime Minister, but it is your job to make the right decision, and you made the wrong one.
Well, that's your view. But it's interesting, isn't it, that today we actually have a democratic government being formed in Iraq. Isn't that something we should actually be proud that we helped bring about?
All right, one more point. Yes.
As I understand it, the Attorney General expressed reservations about the legality of the war. And why not just give the full legal opinion? Because many MPs might have changed their mind under those circumstances. The other point is, when you presented your evidence to the House of Commons, you said it was authoritative and full evidence. I can't remember the exact words. Yet the intelligence said to you it was sporadic and patchy. That is a lie. You lied to this country, and that's why we can't support you at the following election.
You're going to have to make your decision about that. Before you make that decision, though, the interesting thing about the intelligence, and there have been 4 inquiries into this, all of which have found the same thing, that I acted in good faith in relation to the intelligence. But before you make that decision, you can actually go onto the website, I think it's with the Butler report, and you can read the judgments of the Joint Intelligence Committee about Saddam Hussein and weapons of mass destruction. Now, I just ask you, before you make that allegation again, go and read that, and then tell me there was no evidence at all before me.
All right.
Why don't you have a full independent inquiry answering all the questions rather than just specific worded questions which you decide upon?
No, do you know how many inquiries we've had? We've had 4...
But you decide the wording every time.
Well, actually, the Hutton inquiry was a 6-month inquiry. The Foreign Affairs Committee actually decided their own terms of reference. So did the Intelligence Committee. But what I've learnt about this situation is we've had 4 inquiries. We could have another 4. And frankly, after that, we could have another 4.
Just have one. Full public
We've
inquiry.
already had one.
All right. Mr. Blair, can I just take you... You mentioned the Butler inquiry and cited it in your own defence. Can I just quote you from Butler? He said that the intelligence, which, as the young man said correctly, was described by the JIC as sporadic and patchy, that the dossier you produced in September went to the outer limits of that intelligence, and that by calling it extensive, detailed and authoritative, you may have reinforced that impression. Isn't that saying, not that you lied, but that you exaggerated, you over-egged, you misled, you sailed a bit close to the wind when you put across this intelligence to the British public?
What I do accept, frankly, in retrospect, is that it would have been better just to have published the Joint Intelligence Committee reports. I think that would have been a better way of doing it, because then you wouldn't have had this argument. And that's why I said to this young man here that it
doesn't answer my question, that. Why you said it was extensive, detailed and authoritative.
Yes, it was.
Butler ticks you off for saying that. And you keep saying, well, perhaps I shouldn't have said anything at all. Do you mean you were wrong to say that about it?
No, I don't
accept
mean that.
It wasn't that?
What I mean is that Butler said, and I think this is right, and I've accepted this, because I'm not saying there haven't been mistakes made and things for which I have to take responsibility. But I think that, in the end, what would have been better in retrospect is just to have published the raw intelligence, and then people could have seen exactly what the Joint Intelligence Committee actually said to me. And that's why I say to you, and to anybody here or anybody listening to the programme, you can go and read the intelligence I got and then make up your own minds as to whether I'm a liar or not.
Let's take a couple more points on this. The man at the back there.
Yeah, Mr. Blair,
Yes,
the whole perception of where we are with yourself at the moment is you come along, you tell us in 1997 that you're going to be totally transparent, whiter than white. We've had you telling us dossiers that you've got produced to get them past the Labour Party, to get past the parliamentary Labour Party. You've bounced them in with documents that have been sorted out on settees, no doubt. And here we are today. Well, I have to say, you keep saying to us over the last 2 days that you will make the difficult decisions. You will do. That's what you're paid to do. What you're also paid to do is listen to the experts, listen to what the advice that you're being given and make an informed decision. I have to say, I certainly don't think you are transparent from what I hear at the moment. That's without the Mandelson sagas, the Indugers, and that is where you are battling now. You are fighting a rearguard action on the transparency that you told us that when we clear the other lot out in 97, you were going to be the white man in white armour to come along and make it all whiter than white. You haven't done it.
Well, why don't we instead of dealing with perception, we deal with the reality. And if you doubt the position that I'm saying on the intelligence, as I say, the great thing is you can go and read it for yourself and make up your own mind about that. But I like to think that also there are certain changes we've made in this country that we can be proud of as a government.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with that. And where I do disagree with you fundamentally is you've produced something, you've not cut a deal, it's the wrong word. You've committed yourself to support Mr Bush. You've then got to come back here, you've got to get it past your left-wing side of your party. With all due respect, you struggled to get it passed, you lost cabinet ministers over it, and here we are today. We've dragged this out of you today.
Right. I think you made the point.
Dragged a document at 11 o'clock.
Mr Blake, you answer.
I actually think that is a point that is worth responding, head on to, because in the end, yes, I did have to struggle very hard to get this through. But the reason I did it was because I thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't take this on myself for reasons just because I thought, let's give myself a really hard time for a couple of years.
I agree with regime change.
All right, sorry, I think you've had your say,
that's a reasonable enough point. All I say to you on the other stuff is, if you go back and have a look at what I read, then, drop me a line and tell me what you think about it afterwards.
The woman there in grey.
Brian Sedgmore said that you'd pretty much made up your mind before... after going to speak to George Blair, before you'd even spoken
George
to...
Bush,
sorry.
Freudian slip there.
All right. OK.
Freudian slip.
All right.
But before that, you'd even spoken to your own cabinet. And as well as that, if you weren't fraudulent, you're grossly negligent, and for that you should be resigning anyway.
Right. First of all, I don't really know how Brian Sedgmore would know, since I don't think he was ever present at any discussion I ever had with George Bush. In fact, I don't even remember ever discussing it with Brian Sedgmore. But secondly, you've got to make up your mind about it. Look, I've taken my decision, and I would just like to point out to you that, in the end, if I'd taken a different decision, that too would have had difficult consequences. If I decided the course that you want me to take, Saddam Hussein would still be in charge of Iraq today. People would have been dying in Iraq. No, without television cameras there, it's true, but they were. Don't speak to me about it, speak to Iraqis about it. That is why the decision was difficult. It was difficult to remove him.
All
it
right.
was difficult
No, you may
to
not
leave
say
him there.
something. You've
I
had
took
your
the
hand up
decision I
sometime,
thought was
but you've
right for the
spoken
country.
twice already, so no, you can't.